All right, let's bring in some analysis now. He has been the face of the IFP since the 1970s. Professor Becky Mangosuthu says the IFP is facing its toughest test after the death of the founder of the party, Buthelezi. Professor Mangosuthu is director of the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at the Nelson Mandela University. He joins us now. Prof, before we look at the IFP, what is to come, any comments on how this procession is being received by the people of Ulundi, who, as our reporters say, feel that they really benefited from the proximity to the Buthelezi homestead and to the person himself?
Thank you very much, Francis. Yes, indeed. This should not come as a surprise. For someone who has been in office for this long, there are a number of things that he has done, including, of course, building the offices at Ulundi, where the KwaZulu government was housed, and then, of course, many other structures that have been built during his reign, and then many other also community projects that were carried out during his reign. So it doesn't come as a surprise, therefore, that we have many people coming in their numbers to pay their last respect. Even if they don't make it to the actual funeral tomorrow, it's in fact in order for them to show their respect today and then make sure that they do the kinds of things that Ayanda was showing, people kneeling down, whether male or female. That is a sign of respect in appreciation of all the things that he has done, including building factories at Isiteb and at Mandeni and a number of other projects. So you'll see and hear more people, of course, reflecting on some of those things that Prince Buthelezi did during his lifetime. And
in terms of the Amabutu, I mean, we heard that there would be more than 50 buses bringing people from Johannesburg to Durban. I guess for anybody who's part of a military regimen and feels that they should be there, this was the weekend to travel down to Ulundi.
Absolutely, not only from Gauteng, but from across the country, more especially different parts of KwaZulu-Natal, up to the border with Eswatini and Mozambique, where I come from, up to the border with the Eastern Cape and many others. So because even if you don't get a chance to have a glimpse at the hearse, but by mere fact of you being there, psychologically, you are there at the funeral. So therefore, you will have a number of those people doing that. And the fact that you have an estimated 50 buses coming from Gauteng should also not come as a surprise, because outside of KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng is one province that is a number of people who originally come from KwaZulu-Natal or are not necessarily from KwaZulu-Natal, but are Zulus or subscribe to the Zulu nation. So basically then you'll have a number of those people, and some people will just be wanting to see how the funeral goes or how the funeral unfolds. So you'll definitely, we are going to have a number of those people. Most of them went there at work in the mines, but then others just went to stay there, but they still have allegiance to the to KwaZulu-Natal, and therefore they have allegiance to the Zulu nation, and therefore by implication to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who was the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation.
And we now have an understanding of what to expect tomorrow. I will reveal some of those details of the official funeral category 1. But do you agree with me, Prof, that what we've seen already and what we will continue to see are perhaps the different aspects of Prince Buthelezi himself? There's the religious side. We've seen prayer services. He was an Anglican. Then the traditional side, and we'll see the Buthelezi clan and the rituals being done tonight, and then also the state side, a long-term MP, and he is going to be given a eulogy by the state president.
Yes, indeed. In fact, when I was talking to some of your colleagues, I described Buthelezi as a round character, and in the language of cricket as an all-rounder, because he has all those identities which we have just alluded to. Being the leader of the IFP, and then, of course, defining him as a politician, being the traditional prime minister, being the traditional leader of the Buthelezi clan, being a member of parliament at national level, being a member of Christian faith. So all of those identities are correct, and therefore we'll have bits and pieces of that. When his eldest daughter, Princess Tembi, was addressing some of your colleagues, she indicated that when she last saw him, he indicated the types of songs, religious songs, that he wants to be sung during his funeral. So we'll have all of those elements brought together, and then of course the state will have to play its role like they normally do in a funeral of this category. So they will be performing those kinds of duties, and then of course the regiments will definitely play their role, either as members of the Buthelezi clan or as members of the Zulu Nation, because Buthelezi was associated to both. So we'll definitely see most of those happening.
All right, space for all the facets. Professor, you've penned an opinion piece looking at what happens for the IFP now, and the problem has been that Buthelezi has always been a shadow or an umbrella figure, depending on how you look at it, over the party. So what now? You say it'll be a test of the political maturity of the IFP.
Absolutely. The IFP's current leadership will be put to the test because all along from 1975 to date, or from the first democratic elections in 1994, Buthelezi has been the face of the IFP. So whenever they were canvassing during an election or on the eve of an election, be it a general election that is national and provincial, or local government election, they always invoked Prince Buthelezi saying that he's the man who can trust, which is why even the motto of the party says, Setembe, meaning trust us, simply because our leader is the man who can trust. Now the question becomes, with him now no longer there, will that kind of support be present, or will people look the other way as they normally do when a key person has disappeared? So those are some of the key questions. And of course, the fact that Buthelezi was able to garner support from young and old, then the question will be, with the current leadership, are they able to amass support in the same magnitude, or will they in fact go down as it were, and then of course resulting in the party not performing in the way it has performed? So those are some of the questions. There are no simple answers, Francis, because we'll just wait and see what's going to happen, how they are going to support Hlabisa, for example, who is now the leader of the party, who is also going to be tested, because all along he has enjoyed support from Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi and those close to him. And now that Buthelezi is not here, then the question is, whenever there are people who attack him from within, will he be able to withstand that? Whenever people are taken from outside the IFP, will he be able to withstand it? So those are some of the critical questions, not just for Hlabisa, but for the IFP in its entirety.
And of course, the big test is coming, the elections next year. So we will see if voters were voting for Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi or for the party, looking at the support they receive. Professor Becky Mngomezulu is with us. Please stay with us, Professor. But let me cross to my colleague, Sipiwe Makanya. And just for a description, if you've just tuned in, of what you're seeing on your screen earlier, this procession to the homestead was going very slowly, with the Amabutu flanking the vehicle with the casket, but now it is speeding along. Simpiwe, what can you tell us?
There's nothing we can do.
Let's try again. Simpiwe, tell us what you're seeing from your vantage point. How close is this procession to the homestead right now?
Your call has been placed.
All right, our call has been placed on hold. We do have reporters on the ground. Of course, they're also moving very quickly with the convoy now. We heard from Ayanda earlier that the rush really is to get the body back to the palace before sunset. Earlier it was going slowly, and that gave a chance for the people of Ulundi town to come out in their numbers. You can still see the people on the roads, lining up to pay their last respects as the cortege really flashes by at the moment. All right, let's see if Simpiwe can hear me now. Simpiwe, tell us what you're looking at. We're seeing the procession. It was speeding. It slowed down right now. Tell us where you are and what you're seeing and what we can expect.
Yes, Francis, I can certainly hear now. I can hear you now. The procession is making its way through Swaziland and Western, where Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was born. And the body has now left the rural town of Mangosuthu. As I speak to you, there's quite now a few people that are standing on the side of the road. This, of course, in a rural area with few houses next to the road. They are waving their flags, they are waving their hands and chanting slogans. And from where I am, I can say that perhaps we are just about 2 or 3 kilometers away now from the home of IFP founder, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who has brought the town to a complete standstill with thousands and thousands of people, lining up the streets, waving IFP flags, taking out their cell phones, recording this particular moment where the body of the late traditional Prime Minister of the KwaZulu nation, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, is now being taken to his home in the rural village of Mahlabatini. I had earlier on an interaction between you, Francis, and Professor Mangosuthu, who was talking about the politics of the IFP. Now that Prince Mangosuthu is no more, looking, of course, at the influence and the support that the current president, the Republican, is likely to get from within the ranks of the party. And, of course, it's not a secret that there are those divisions within the IFP, particularly about the issue of leadership of the party. And as I speak to you, Francis, there's more and more people who have converged next to the home of the Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And as it was, the opposition is now converged about 500 or so meters away from the home of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. They are in a jovial mood, Francis. Many of them that was been interacting with, saying that they have come here to pay their respect and Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who has been dedicated his life over 7 decades leading the nation in the position of being the traditional Prime Minister to the Mahlabatini nation. Of course, a lot has been said also about his legacy as a politician, with community members, particularly from this rural town of Burundi. And that is very much to bring about development and also, fight the issue of
All right, we've lost Simpiwe Makanya talking about that procession. We apologize for the poor sound. Of course, this is a convoy in motion and our reporters are with it, moving from the Ulundi mortuary to KwaPinangeni, the homestead where the body is expected to be received by Mangosuthu from the Buthelezi clan, and there will be a ritual ceremony tonight, and some will be able to come in and pay their last respects. That was told to us at a marquee, but it will be a closed casket. The rush is to get the body home, as it were, before sunset. Well, we have been in conversation with Professor Becky Mngomezulu, looking at the political legacy of Prince Buthelezi and what it means for the IFP now. Also, of course, the emotions that have been brought up by his death, many remembering him as a hero, somebody involved in liberation, involved in post-apartheid South Africa, the course of history. Others looking at his contested legacy under him. The IFP was implicated in many killings, although he says he did not commission any of them. Professor, you're back with us. We were talking about the President Velenkosini Hlabisa. I mean, how's he been doing in trying to consolidate his own support base? So we were looking at the issue of personality, of the fact that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi's picture has still been on election posters even after he stepped down.
Francis, you are asking a very critical question. In fact, I think that the IFP could have handled the issue differently. When we recall that until 2012, there was no deputy president in the IFP. The only person who was leading the party was Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Until then, in 2012, they then elected that is Nkosi Mzamo Buthelezi from Bongobongweni to be the deputy. So at that time, there are people who said at least now there is a deputy president and there is a succession plan, and they were even thinking that Nkosi Mzamo was going to be the next president. But then, of course, that was never to be because soon thereafter, the leadership of the IFP decided that or unanimously agreed that Velenkosini Hlabisa was going to be Buthelezi's successor. As an individual, Hlabisa is a humble person. I happen to know him because he was my classmate at the University of Zululand. He's a humble person, and some people might take that as a disadvantage because they want someone who be bold out there talking loudly. He's not that kind of a person. He's a humble person. And then, of course, he has been a loyal member of the IFP for many years. I remember during the times when we were at the University of Zululand, we knew who the members of the IFP were, who the members of the Youth League were. Those of us who were not members of the IFP could look into them as to what they were doing and how they were doing it. Hlabisa and Skonde, and of course there was another one called Mutula. The three of them, the trio, they were known to be staunch supporters of the IFP. And since then, he has moved up the ladder, becoming a mayor at some point. So he's the kind of a person whose credentials cannot be doubted. But in terms of the charisma, he would never be matched with Buthelezi. As a matter of fact, there is no single member of the IFP that I think of that would match Buthelezi's caliber, mostly because people saw him as being equivalent to the IFP. You could not talk about the IFP without talking about Buthelezi. But then when Hlabisa emerged victorious then, because he was elected without any opposition in 2019, then people said, okay, we're now opening a new page. Unfortunately, then there are things that did not change. For example, like the point we're making, the face of Prince Buthelezi was still on the T-shirts, and some people were saying that, how can that be when we already have a new leader? Then the explanation given was that this is just to honor Buthelezi, at least in the 2019 election and then in the 2021 election. The understanding was that after that, they were going to change it. And then we'll wait and see, because we have elections coming next year, if they will still do it. My suspicion is that they might retain Buthelezi's face and argue that the election coming next year will be in honor of Buthelezi. So let's just watch the space and see how they are going to handle it. But on the other side, this
Prof,
does not
sorry
go well
to cut in, that would be an interesting strategy. So harnessing the legacy of Prince Buthelezi in next year's elections. Please hold that thought and stay with us. But Ayanda Mhlongo is on the ground, and of course we're getting closer to the homestead. Ayanda, tell us what you can see.
Thank you, Francis. Yes, we are about, I'd say, less than a kilometer away now from the homestead. Of course, we are going to be moving now a little bit slower because the group of Amabuto that was waiting to receive the body of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi has now joined the funeral cortege, and they are ahead of us. If you see in our visuals from our vantage point, they have now surrounded the hearse as they make its way closer to KwaPhindangene. You are seeing scores of local community members of the IFP, young and old, that have been lining the streets. Since we last spoke, Francis, it's thousands of people that have come out, completely bringing the area of KwaNongoma to a standstill. And of course now this is the road that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi would have taken millions of times when he was going home, and now he makes his last journey here to his home. Of course, as I indicated earlier on, Francis, what we understood from what the elders briefed us in terms of what is expected once we get to the family home is that Amabuto and senior members of the Buthelezi clan, as well as the family led by the chief mourner, Prince Zuzifa Buthelezi, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi's son, they will then remove the coffin from the hearse. It will then go into a hut that was built at the home for rituals for about an hour. There are rituals that need to be performed. Thereafter, the hearse, the coffin, I beg your pardon, will then be taken into a marquee that has been prepared, and this is for the thousands of mourners that are expected to come through to the family home today. The coffin will be a closed coffin according to the wishes of the family, but they did say that members of the public, close friends of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, would be able to come through to pay their respects. Of course, we're seeing thousands of Francis of locals that have come out in their numbers. There are also international guests that are expected to arrive, including the former Nigerian president, Mr. Olusegun Obasanjo, a very close friend to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. In fact, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi delivered the first Obasanjo lecture in Nigeria, and recently the Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation extended an invitation when they launched the foundation, extended an invitation to the former Nigerian president to deliver the main address at the launch of Prince Mangosuthu's foundation. So they have been very dear and close friends for quite some time. In fact, I think, Francis, that was probably the last time that former Nigerian president saw in person Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. The numbers of people, Francis, that have come out here, thousands and thousands of people have come out here lining the street. For some, this will probably be the last time they at least get to wave and bid their farewells, those that will possibly not attend the funeral. We are expecting about 20,000 people to attend the funeral. But by looking at the numbers of people, Francis, that have come out here today, it does look like the venue that has been arranged, being the Prince Mangosuthu Stadium, might not be able to take the capacity of people that we are seeing here. We are told that there are buses that are coming from as far as Gauteng. Those buses are en route from Mpumalanga and other provinces as well, bringing supporters of the IFP, bringing Amabuto, and they are expected to arrive from tonight overnight. You're just seeing in our visuals more and more people making their way to KwaPhindangene residence. We are now about a kilometer or even less away from the family home, Francis. Thousands of people that you are seeing in your visuals, and of course right in front we have the Zulu regiments, Amabutho, who are accompanying their traditional prime minister. They've been saying to us, Francis, since the news of the passing of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, that indeed it's a dark day for the AmaZulu nation, considering the life of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, his dedication to the Zulu nation. They said he has served with distinction, and he has really grown and united the AmaZulu nation. I think many people across South Africa saw the role that he played just before or following the passing of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, the role that he played before the crowning of King Mangosuthu Buthelezi, despite the differences and the tensions within the AmaZulu royal family, but he was able to steer things along until King Mangosuthu was eventually crowned. And just speaking of King Mangosuthu, just to remind our viewers again that over the past couple of days they might have been wondering, where is King Mangosuthu? The king does not attend a funeral. Instead, he sent a delegation. He sent a delegation to the family. We also saw members of the royal family. If I remember, I think it was on Tuesday, they all came out to pay their tribute and pay homage to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi in person. And we're speaking to some of the members of the royal family, Francis, Prince Thulani Zulu, the brother of the late king, and he is still, he is part of the cortege here today, and saying that today this is a difficult day for him. Prince Buthelezi played a huge role within the royal family, and he will sorely be missed. Of course, we have also in the midst of this cortege the president of the IFP, and I was just looking at his facial expression. He really, Francis, does look like a lost man. He has been saying how difficult this period has been for him, that they don't know how they're going to be able to continue without Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, but the promise that they have made is that in his honor they are going to continue to grow the Inkatha Freedom Party. The members of the public that have come out here in their numbers, locals, community members from this area of Mahlabatini, also coming out in their numbers, also saying that he leaves a huge void. We were speaking to community members throughout the week, in fact neighbors of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who would tell us that they would never go to bed hungry. Whatever they needed, even if he wasn't at home, they could always go knock on the door and somebody was going to be able to help him. There was a lot that he did in terms of development for this area, education, the promotion of education for young people. There was a lot that he did towards community development as well, and these are all the things that they are going to miss from him. You'd remember that when we were driving past the town of Ulundi, we were saying there, Francis, that that town would possibly not had been destroyed had it not been for the role that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi played during the unrest, where at 93 years old he went out at midnight to stop people that were intent on looting the town, explaining to them what destroying the town would have meant to them. And so a lot of people just pointing just to the town to say, we have a town today, we have jobs today, most importantly, because of the efforts of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Neighboring towns as well saying that they were saved because he is the one that sent out Izinduna, he sent out headsmen and Amakosi to go out to the towns to ensure that they protect the town. So certainly, Francis, the sentiments that have been made by people young and old, whether in traditional leadership or within the structures of the ANC, how difficult this moment is for them. We are now approaching, as you possibly might see in the distance there, Francis, the marquees. That is we have now arrived essentially at the KwaPhindangene residence. In fact, we're now about 500 meters away from the KwaPhindangene residence. And as I said, just to remind our viewers, once we get to the home, Amabuto, members of the Buthelezi clan, led by the chief mourner, his son, will then remove the coffin from the hearse. It will be taken into a hut where rituals will be performed for the next hour or so. Thereafter, the body will be taken into a marquee, and this to allow for the thousands of people that we are seeing to be able to be part of the service, and those that would like or didn't have an opportunity during the week to come and pay their respects to the family. Francis?
Thank you very much, Ayanda. And there we can see that shot of just the thousands who have come out to pay their respects. What has emerged today, he may have a very contested legacy nationally, a lot of debate around the history, but Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, well loved in Ulundi. The cortege passed through the town of Ulundi from the Ulundi mortuary and is now, like Ayanda said, very close to KwaPhindangene. We saw the visual of the sun starting to go down. There was a rush at one point to get home, get his body home before the sunset. All right, let's bring in Professor Musa Xolo, and we also are still joined by Professor Becky Mngomezulu. Professor Xolo, a cultural expert. Professor, can you explain what we can expect or what will be taking place inside that hut? So Ayanda says that members of the Buthelezi clan will receive the body and then rituals will be performed. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, thank you very much. Once the body is at the hut, inside the hut, there is a lot of talking to the ancestors. I know that, for example, they would be having that branch from the tree, which they use to carry the spirit together with the body. And then inside the hut, what they will be doing is some sprinklings in terms of maybe some traditional medicines, and as well as addressing the ancestors to say that he is here now, please accept him on your side and make him strong so that as an ancestor himself, he can come back here to bring us good luck and prosperity as a family. They will also be talking to the past kings, besides the past Amakosi of the Buthelezi family. They'll be also talking to, I think because her mother was very strong, they would talk to her as well. His mother was very strong. They'll talk to her as well, Princess Makoko Katinuzulu. This is what will take place. And then, of course, just inviting the spirits to be with him and to guide him through tonight and tomorrow into the grave and receive him there and make him grow there. Because when he arrives there in the land of the dead, he's a child. He needs to be initiated in the new role as an ancestor.
Are there specific rituals specifically for somebody of his stature, prince, traditional prime minister, the stature he has amongst the members of the Zulu nation?
Well, yes, but in the heart, it will be reserved for the family, and the family will deal with family issues. There could also be some kind of confessions and reconciliation inside of that heart, so that when they bury him tomorrow, there is no one that has a heavy heart against him, and they'll be asking for whoever has a problem and needs forgiveness or to forgive him to do so before the funeral tomorrow. So it will be strictly inside the heart. It's strictly a family affair. And usually each clan has got its own ways in which it addresses those issues. The script is the same, but the details depend on which clan it is. Now, as you say now, as Ndunankulu, Chief Minister of Prime Minister of the Zulu Nation and His Majesty the King, he has two identities. Two ritual identities. The first ritual identity is that of him as a Buthelezi Inkosi, and the second ritual identity is that of him as a Prime Minister of the Zulu Nation. In fact, the third ritual identity is that of him as bearing the royal blood of the Zulu Nation, the Zulu royal house. So what will happen? They'll try to address all those ancestors. Basically, it's about ensuring that his transition to the new world of ancestorship is smooth.
The second part sounds perhaps less traditional, but we understand that the casket will be placed in a marquee to give many more people a chance to come and pay their last respects in close proximity, although it will be a closed casket according to the family wishes. So would that just be a chance for people to say their last words?
Yes. What will happen, I think it will happen tonight, it's some kind of night vigil where people will have opportunities to because then they'll be singing hymnals and all of those. And also I think a lot of IFP struggle songs overnight. And so they'll be able to stand up and say, each one expressing whatever Buthelezi did to them. You were saying earlier how he, for example, made education possible. Somebody called me this morning to say before Mangosuthu Buthelezi became traditional prime minister of the Zulu Nation, the Zulu Nation was known as uneducated people. And when he became chief minister of KwaZulu homeland, one of his first tasks and aims was to change that around and look at the colleges of education, the Mangosuthu University of Technology, and every village now does not only have a primary school, but also a high school. Those are the kinds of words that you can expect from the public overnight, expressing how he helped them. And he said also he used to be able to help even individual homesteads and households. I know a lot of people who at some stage would not have money to send their children to school. They would go and camp outside of that gate, and he would find money from his own pocket to help families, or for food, or for Christmas, or for all the other occasions. So it would be lots of attributes from mainly tonight ordinary people from around that area.
All right, certainly we have seen an outpouring of gratitude. Professor Musa Nxolo, cultural expert, thank you very much. Let's join Simpiwe Makanya again. He's on the ground following the procession for us. And Simpiwe, it looks like it's getting darker, and this is the arrival.
We are now at the main gate of KwaPindangen residence, and as I speak to you, the Amabutho that have been accompanying the body of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi are at the main gate of his home, where they are going to be taking his body inside the residence. It's not quite clear though at the moment, Francis, if the thousands or hundreds rather of Amabutho and IFP supporters who have been accompanying the body will be allowed to enter the residence of KwaPindangen. As you would imagine, thousands of them have been, lining up the streets since that journey began from the mortuary all the way to the KwaPindangen village in Mahlabatini. The first group of Amabutho is now standing next to the main entrance of the KwaPindangen residence, as of course that has carrying the body of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi is also approaching the main gate of his home. From here, Francis, we believe that once the body has entered the residence, then there is going to be some family rituals that are going to be performed by the family. This, of course, leading up to the funeral service that is going to be held tomorrow, which was declared by President Cyril Ramaphosa as a special official funeral category 1. On my visuals, Francis, I can see Prince Ntuthuko Zuzifa Buthelezi. Of course, he's accompanying the hearse that is carrying the body, which is now about to enter the residence of KwaPhindangene. The rural town of Ulundi came to a standstill, Francis, throughout the afternoon, really, when we saw thousands of residents, not just IFP supporters, but also just residents in their normal clothes, waving and taking out their cell phones, recording this very historic moment, because you would understand that many of the people who live in this rural area of Ulundi, held Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi in high regard. When we spoke to some of them earlier on in the week, they said that he stood for, the development of this particular area, and he also stood for, the AmaZulu royal household being united. He was hailed for a number of really, initiative in uniting the AmaZulu nation. As I speak to you, Francis, I believe the main gate has now been opened for the hearse that is carrying the body of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi to enter the residence of KwaPhindangene, and the hundreds of IFP supporters as well as AmaZulu regiments, Amabutho, have now been told to stand next to the gate to allow the hearse to make its way inside the premises of the residence, Francis.
All right, thank you very much, Simpiwe. Yes, and we've seen the Amabutho in traditional livery and they're members of the clergy receiving the body as well as it has arrived at the KwaPhindangene residence right now. Right, so what we've heard is that there will be a private ritual ceremony done in that hut. Nobody besides close family members will be privy to what is happening there. But then the marquee will be opened, a closed casket, but some more will be able to come and pay their last respects. And I can give you some insight now into what we can expect tomorrow, who we will hear from at the official Category 1 funeral that will be held in the stadium in Ulundi. We will hear from Archbishop Thabo Makgoba. Remember, there will be a strong Anglican element to the proceedings tomorrow. We will hear from the Premier. We will hear from somebody on behalf of the Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi Foundation. We will hear from somebody on behalf of the Amakhosi Nkosi RS Shinga. Then there will be tributes from the state, from the Speaker of Parliament of the National Assembly, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, a tribute from the family, and then a eulogy by the President, Cyril Ramaphosa. And of course, this official funeral, Category 1, set aside for ministers, for people who are distinguished and specifically designated by the President. We have been in conversation with Professor Bheki Mngomezulu from the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at Nelson Mandela University. Professor, welcome back. Something we will see tomorrow is former heads of state who often don't We don't see in the same room together former President Jacob Zuma, former President Thabo Mbeki, and others. And of course, there will be this stately side and this remembrance of the IFP and the ANC and their former relationship. My question to you is looking at what's come out now, some remembering that the IFP came from the ANC, some remembering the black on black violence. Do you think that this death has brought the two parties closer together, or will see them tearing further apart?
Francis, thank you for your question. It depends on the caliber of leaders that you have on both sides. If leaders of the IFP are determined to honor the late Prince Buthelezi in a dignified manner, they will have to put their differences with the ANC aside. Similarly, if those who are leading the ANC currently are determined to remember Mangosuthu Buthelezi in a dignified manner, they will also have to do the same. So the onus is on those who are remaining on both sides. It's not something that you can argue about that in 1949 Prince Buthelezi joined the ANC Youth League. Everybody knows that, or at least people who didn't know, they know by now, because people like myself and Professor Kolo have been saying these things since the word came on Saturday last week that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi had passed on. So I think that that history cannot be changed. Where people are going to have the differences of opinion is with regards to political violence. One thing that I think people should know is that the late Prince Buthelezi had different identities, in the sense that from 1949 when he joined the ANC Youth League up to 1979, his last meeting with the ANC in exile in London, he was a different man. And then of course some would say, by virtue of him participating in the Bantustan, then he was a sellout. But then a counter view will tell you that even that episode, the ANC was not unaware of that. It's just that later on, some within the ANC felt that Prince Buthelezi was amassing more support than was expected, and then they were fearing that even if freedom were to come, he would be one person that would give them a hard time if he were to go on the other side of the equation. But then the meeting of 1979 is where things went wrong, because after that, with the formation of the UDF in 1983, and then of course we know that there were a number of people who died after 1983, and then there was a formation of the SDUs, Self-Defense Unit, and then the SPUs, the Self-Protection Unit, who were siding with the IFP, and the SDUs protecting the UDF and the ANC. So if you look at one side, you are going to miss the entire story. So it's good to look at both sides and say, those who are remembering Prince Buthelezi in a positive light are not wrong, and those who are remembering him negatively, they might not be wrong if they believe that he played a part in the violence. But similarly, the same blame should be apportioned to the ANC/UDF. So it depends where you stand on the issue and which facts you want to emphasize.
Of course. Professor Mangosuthu, thank you. Please stay with us. So much more to discuss. What we are seeing, I understand, is that members of the Anglican Church are saying a prayer as the body enters the residence. Let's listen in for a little while.
And shall neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things anything else in all creation would be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord.
Remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. And according to your mercy,
we brought nothing into the world, and we take nothing out. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Manje sikwazi kuweni kalufifi ngifana sobonana ubuso nobuso manje ngazi ingxenye lapho sokwazana ubuso nobuso
akekho kethi osiphilela yena akekho nosifela yena ukuba uma siphila siphilela inkosi uma sifa simphela inkosi ngakho ke noma siphila noma sifa singabe inkosi
The eternal God is your refuge, and under it are the everlasting arms. In my Father's house are many mansions. If we did not so, I would have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you.
Yesu adibonanga indlebe izwanga inhliziyo ibonanga lokho kushoyo uNkulunkulu akulungiselele abantwana bakhe.
We believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so it will be for those who die as Christians. God will bring them to life with Jesus. Thus, we shall always be with the Lord. Comfort one another with these words.
He who believes in me, though he die, yet shall live in me. Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die.
I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. I myself will say him with my own eye, and not another. Do not bring your servant into judgment, for no one living is righteous before you. I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor anything in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ our Lord.
uNkulunkulu ophakade uyisiphephelo nangaphansi zikhona izingalo ezinguna phakade.
Remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions, but according to your mercy, think on me.
We brought nothing into this life, and we take nothing out. God gives, God taketh. Message is the name of the
For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face I know in part, but then I shall know, even though as I am known.
None of us lives to himself, none of us dies to himself. If we live for the Lord, and if we die for the Lord. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's.
The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms.
In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not, I would have told you, I am going there to prepare a place for you.
Eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart conceived what God has prepared for those who love him.
Sikholwa ukuthi uJesu wafa wabuye wavuka. Ngakho siyakholwa ukuthi uNkulunkulu uyakubaletha abaleleyo kuJesu kanye naye. Ngakho ithuthuzanani ngalamazwi.
This is louder, baby.
We're walking and praying, and even in this procession, we've seen facets of the life of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, the traditional side with the Amabuthu flanking the vehicle carrying the casket, now the religious side, and of course there was the political stately side, and we know that dignitaries have arrived at the residents in KwaZulu-Natal. Let's go back as that prayer, that walking prayer continues.
Nazinto ezizayo akukuba namandla kusahlukanisa nothando lukaNkulunkulu olukuKristu Jesu Nkosi yethu.
Ungazikhumbule izono zobusha bami kodwa ngikhumbulele ukumsa wakho.
The SABC News' Natasha Piri is at the homestead where the body has arrived, and of course the idea was that the arrival would happen before sunset. Natasha, what is happening right now? And there were so many people trying to get in. Just tell us about the access control, who has been allowed in, and what is happening from your vantage point.
Francis, before we actually speak about the access point, what you're seeing right now are the various, church leaders that are actually walking ahead of the family, and behind them is Amabutho. Of course, just at the far end, I can see the spokesperson of the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi's political home, Mkhululeko Hlengwa, as well as IFP President Mr. Velenkosini Hlabisa Francis. Of course, what we saw when these church leaders came in, as well as his longtime friend Reverend Musa Zondi, as well as Bishop Thabo Makgoba, as them leading the family in prayer. And of course, you could see various family members visibly sad. Francis, of course, this is as the family will be paying their last respects to the Zulu Prime Minister, and of course the head of the Zulu clan, Francis. We've seen a lot of people, friends, families, some from his political home in this past week coming in and paying their respects. Some saying that really a tall giant has actually fallen. The baobab, some have said, of the Zulu nation has fallen, Francis. A lot of people just talking about the great man that the late Zulu Prime Minister actually was. Today we were just speaking with various community members in and around this area, and of course they've been saying that there was so much development that the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was actually invested in his area. Because of him, Francis, there is a hospital here, a clinic. Because of him, there are jobs for the people here. There are schools, and therefore he will be really missed. He was described as a man who really loved the Zulu nation and fought for the rights and championed the rights of the Zulu nation. It's quite interesting to know that Francis, in the 1950s, he had actually, formed Ithala Bank, and this bank had actually grown. Right now, it's evolved over the years. It has over 39 branches, and of course, over 300,000, clients across, the country. And of course, this bank was actually established, Francis, for especially rural people, those who don't have access to commercial banks. And we heard the CEO of Ithala Bank yesterday saying that, the local bank in this area will be renamed to the, Dr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi, in honor of his name and in honor of his vision, Francis, what he stood for, and what he meant to the Zulu nation. Remember, this was a man who was an advisor, Francis, to three kings throughout his life and in his tenure. King Cyprus Bheki Zulu, King Goodwill Zwelithini, and King Misizulu. And of course, What you're seeing right now are various church leaders, of course, just walking and waiting for the family. Of course, they'll be ushered in this tent behind me, Francis, where it looks like a service will be held for him. Earlier on, we spoke to his son, Zuzifa Buthelezi, and of course, he had said that later on there would be a church service for him. And of course, you would understand that the family will then be spending time with him. Remember, this is in line with cultural and traditional rights that need to be afforded to the prince, of course, as the chief of the Buthelezi clan. So, Francis, what you're seeing right now are those visuals of these church leaders that are then leading the family members behind, and of course, the IFP leader there, Ubab Velenkosini Hlabisa Francis. Of course, they will then usher the various family members into the tent where a church service will be held. There at the far end, Francis, I'm not so sure if Kwazimanzi, my colleague, can show you. The family members are being led inside the tent. And of course, after that, you can see the church leaders, the IFP president there, Mr. Hlabisa, and there you can see the Archbishop, Mr. Thabo Makgoba, leading some of the family members inside the service. A lot of praise, a lot of salutation has been pouring in and coming in, not only from South Africans, Francis, but of course from the international community. You've heard there, no surprise, by former Nigerian President, Mr. Obasanjo, just singing of his praises, and also, Francis, just earlier on this year, if you'd remember, there was that Prince Mangosuthu lecture that was held earlier on this year, and in that lecture, you had the former Nigerian president just labeling and describing the relationship between the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi and the late South African former statesman Nelson Mandela as diplomatic, Francis. He recalls many a times that he visited former President Nelson Mandela, the late Nelson Mandela, in Robben Island, and the things that he had to say about the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, saying that he was indeed a man of peace. And we've heard these sentiments from his political home, the IFP, saying that this is a man who brought about peace, who brought about stability, in the 1980s and the 1990s, Francis, where we saw that acrimonious relationship with the ANC, of course, that unfortunately spilled out to that political violence. Some label it as black on black violence, Francis. And the mounting calls that have been coming in here, Francis, is that the two parties need to make peace and need to reconcile. This was echoed out by a long-standing friend of the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, Reverend Musa Zondi, saying that the ANC and the IFP need to come together and reconcile, Francis, for the sake of the people of South Africans. And the Reverend Musa Zondi had been saying, Francis, that this was the late Prince Mangosuthu's dying wish, that Francis, both parties, the ANC, of which the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi actually belonged to. Remember, he served in the ANC Youth League when he was a student in Fort Hare, alongside, people like ZK Matthews, Kenneth Kaunda, the likes of Robert Mugabe. And this is just the wish, his dying wish, his last wish, that the two parties reconcile. We heard there from the ANC Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, saying that in honor of his memory, the memory of the late Mangosuthu Buthelezi, reconciliation needs to happen between the two parties. I mean, we saw at his memorial service there, IFP President Velenkosi Nhlabisa saying that the ANC had actually vilified the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, but also pledging there and vowing that as the IFP they will carry out his legacy, and in carrying out his legacy they will ensure that the party actually grows in leaps and bounds. And this is very crucial, Francis, because I mean next year you would recall that the country is actually going to a watershed election, Francis. And of course, we just recently saw in the recent weeks or months where the IFP had joined the multi-charter party for South Africa, where the aim for this coalition or pre-coalition government is to actually unseat the ANC government. Francis, what you're hearing and what you're seeing right now are salutations from the family. If I'll just allow us to actually hear and see what's going on right now.
Sure.
Now, I believe, is the casket being taken out of that vehicle, or preparations to do so. The body of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi has arrived at the KwaZulu-Natal residence, the Buthelezi homestead. It will be taken into that structure called a hut or a tent, where there will be some rites performed for about an hour. We understand only family members will be involved in that. Then the closed casket, as per the family wishes, will be taken into a marquee where more people can pay their respects. And we've seen today an outpouring from people on the ground in Ulundi town, in the areas surrounding this homestead, talking about the work that the Prince did in the community. Let's just listen in as that casket is moved forward. It's religious, traditional. Let's bring in our international editor, Sophie Mokoena. We've seen an outpouring on the ground, Sophie, and also we are understanding that dignitaries are there tonight, and of course there will be many at the funeral tomorrow, including some who've jetted in, like the former Nigerian president. Tell us more.
Yes, indeed, many are going to be there to pay their last respects, but also to say farewell to the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. But as you can see, the visuals there, the son next to Archbishop Thabo Makgoba leading that body. This is part of the African tradition where the eldest son is always at hand or there to ensure that everything goes according to the wishes of the person who has passed on, but also in relation to the traditions. When they arrived, you heard people talking there before the body was removed from the car. It's because they were talking to him. In African culture, people believe that even though a person has passed on, he can still hear, and they were doing part of the traditional rituals, and therefore now they are getting there in the house and also ensuring that inside the house a similar situation will prevail, where they will start with talking to him, but also talking to whoever they believe in this culture in terms of where to from here. And you can see the son is leading all that. You know that in the culture, African culture, your eldest son is almost your peer in terms of the father. In other words, now he has to step in to ensure that everything is done according to the culture. And you heard one person saying, manje sesifuna aboshenge manje sesifuna aboshenge, hlehlani madoda, hlehlani. He was saying, now we want the clan to come forward. Everybody must take a step back. Now we want the clan to come forward to do the right thing as it's been done in terms of the culture. And of course, then you are correct, many international dignitaries will be there. We'll have people from the United Kingdom, from Germany, from Zambia, and of course, as you pointed out, the former Nigerian president, a friend to the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, is going to be there. But of course, for me, what is also important is the 3 former South African presidents will be there. You know, when Madiba passed on, we saw that picture of the former leadership of the country and the current leadership at that time, and led by President Jacob Zuma then being there. We are going to see a similar picture tomorrow because former President Jacob Zuma will be there. Former President Kgalema Motlanthe will be there. Former President Thabo Mbeki will be there. And the sitting president, President Cyril Ramaphosa, will lead this powerful, high-powered delegation of government and former government officials, and ANC, of course.
And Sophie, you don't often see the current president and all the living former presidents reflecting together and in the same room. I guess it just points to the importance of this event.
Very symbolic. I hope South Africans are watching and will be watching tomorrow that as there's a package that was earlier on air where we had different voices, particularly the former President Nelson Mandela, when he was alive, his views around the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and the former President Thabo Mbeki, reflecting at one point in Parliament, saying no one is holy, or no one can claim that he didn't make mistakes at some point in time. We will see that tomorrow. And you'd recall even during the memorial, many parties were actually talking about, yes, some of the issues are controversial, but where to from here? And you'd recall that the EFF, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, talking about that and a backlash, but many are saying now it's the same. The president is going to speak. So how do you criticize certain people and you leave out certain people when we can see that everybody is trying to ensure that peace prevail at this critical moment? And even the IFP is ensuring that everybody does have a say. They do acknowledge where there are issues, because even Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi himself said he was not a saint, and therefore at some point in time, after presenting or giving a report at the TRC on behalf of his political party, he pointed out that he is no saint. You'd recall that powerful image where he was crying, saying, yes, mistakes were done, but I think going forward, where to from here? We will continue to hate each other, but how do we handle such situation? You'd recall he received a standing ovation crying, and you'd recall at some point in time, it was in 1999 at Thokoza Memorial, where they were honoring those who died during the unrest. Former President Thabo Mbeki walking side by side with Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi to ensure that they demonstrate leadership, that yes, we are not proud of this part of the history, but as a nation, we have to find a way to move forward. And that's what Madiba's presidency all along was all about.
So, Sophie, we've heard from the IFP president that Mangosuthu Buthelezi has been vilified by the ANC. That's what he said. And then the EFF's Mbuyiseni Ndlozi got up at the memorial and said Mangosuthu Buthelezi was a man of peace. So you see these divisions, and then he was accused of playing politics. I guess it suggests that the president has to tread carefully tomorrow.
Yes, the president will have to tread carefully tomorrow. This is a very sensitive moment, but also a sensitive province. You cannot, as a leader, create an animosity or, and make statements that are likely going to cause that tension. Because we are now moving towards elections, and you want a KZN province not to be a no-go area. All parties must be able to campaign. And therefore, I think when he is delivering that message, he is going to have that in mind to say, as a leader of this country, as a man in charge right now, I have to pull the nation together, and I have to give a way forward in terms of how we handle the differences. I mean, President Ramaphosa was part of the talks at CODESA, and he is very aware, and he had a close relationship also with former President Nelson Mandela. He's fully aware that in terms of the ANC leadership, the senior leadership, some of them who are not here anymore, they wanted peace in this country. And therefore, but taking into consideration that there are families who are still aggrieved, and as we do that, we have to balance the two. And many of those families, we spoke to them leading to this funeral, and they were saying that yes, it happened, we were hurt, but we have taken a decision to forgive. And therefore, I think that's the spirit in relation to if you want to build a country, but you cannot erase the history, and you cannot be not thinking about those who feel aggrieved. You must also give them space to express their views. But as a leader, as the president of the country, he has to ensure that after tomorrow, nothing happens going forward, particularly ahead of elections. And the leadership of the IFP has done just that. Because I spoke to the former President Thabo Mbeki's office. They say he spoke to him on many occasions, even recently, asking that the former president must speak to the ANC as an elder to facilitate his return to the ANC. For me, it's not a return to be an active member of ANC or to be a real member of ANC, but how to close that chapter of ANC and IFP. And secondly, him saying the former president also looking at the relationship between Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi and the king. You know, the relationship got very, very tense recently. And these are the two main issues that he wanted the former president Thabo Mbeki to assist, because he wanted peace. So maybe those who are saying he was a man of peace, somehow they are vindicated, because at the end of the day, he tried to ensure that he does show remorse, but also ensure that the country is united.
And we'll see how that is dealt with tomorrow, if that was his wish to be reconciled with the ANC, even having an ANC flag over the coffin. We'll come back to you, SABC News' international editor, Sophie Mokoena. Thank you very much. But let's take you back to the homestead where the body of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi has arrived. That's where we find our reporter, Natasha Piri. Natasha, tell us what's happening right now.
Well, Francis, I'm actually joined by a member of the family and also joined by the mayor of Zululand, and he'll just tell us the process from now on and quite explain what actually happened right now. Mr. Buthelezi, thank you so much for joining us on SABC News. So we saw the body of the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi being brought into that house. Can you just please explain what happens from now on?
Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi has made his final journey home. Amabutho brought his body up as well at Wapindangene. He was received by the Archbishop of Cape Town, Archbishop Makgoba, and the clergy. And the church service is just about to start now, a short prayer service before the main funeral tomorrow.
We also understand that traditional rites have to be performed as well.
Well, we know that the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was Inkosi of the Buthelezi clan. He was Prime Minister of the Zulu Nation, and right now the family has been given space in the sacred crawl for them to come to terms as a family and do the necessary customs which they need to do, whereafter we will begin the short prayer service.
I mean, just as a family member, your personal experiences with him, how will you remember him? And I mean, what did you learn from the late Prince?
Firstly, as the Buthelezi family, we would like to express our heartfelt thanks for the outpouring of love. We have been overwhelmed by the support from all South Africans who have come here to pay their last respects to Prince Buthelezi. Today, the whole town of Ulundi came to a standstill as they honored a man who lived with values of integrity and Ubuntu. And we hope that we, as the family who are left behind, and his party, the IFP, will continue to uphold that legacy.
I like the fact that you speak about the people of Ulundi. I mean, just speaking to them, they speak so much to the development of this area because of him. Some people are saying that they are employed because of him. There are schools, a lot of facilities and service deliveries actually made because of him.
Well, Prince Buthelezi stayed amongst his people. He never left his people. He shared in their sufferings and developed Zululand out of nothing into the economic giant it is today. Therefore, every family in Zululand has been touched by the leadership of Prince Buthelezi. We feel the void, but as a family, we feel strengthened by this comfort and love which we have received from all South Africans across the board.
You talk about the economy. I mean, one thing that I actually found out yesterday is that in the 1950s, he actually founded Ithala Bank. And you look at the bank years down the line, how it has evolved. It has over 300,000 clients, over 39 branches across, the country. And it was developed specifically for rural people who don't have commercial banks.
Well, whatever Prince Buthelezi started has stood the test of time. Like Ithala Bank is still alive even today, because he has always had a far-reaching vision, not only for black people, but for all South Africans. And today we celebrate his legacy. He has arrived at home, and we pause to reflect on the life of this great man.
You were also involved in IFP youth politics. Just looking at the party and looking at the trajectory of the party, you're heading to the polls next year. The IFP has recently signed the multi-party charter of South Africa, but yet you also have the ANC that says, let's preach the message of reconciliation.
I think the IFP owes it to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi to win back the province of KwaZulu-Natal in 2024. The people of KwaZulu-Natal have felt the leadership of Prince Buthelezi when the IFP was leading, and they yearn for that. Our people are ravaged by crime every day. They are ravaged by unemployment. They are ravaged by corruption. And I hope the IFP will uphold the legacy and do it for Umtwana to win the elections in the province next year.
Do you see the reconciliation process actually gaining fruition? You've heard the ANC Deputy President on Tuesday when he came to visit the family saying that in his memory they need to continue this process. His long-standing friend, Reverend Musa Zondi, also saying that his last wish was to reconcile his former party, the ANC, with the IFP. Is this something that will actually be a lived reality in his memory?
Well, it's a tragedy that the ANC did not reach out while Prince Buthelezi was still alive. It would have been much more worthwhile and more meaningful for them to reconcile and correct the propaganda that they spread about him while he was still alive. I think for us as a family and for the IFP, what is important is to uphold the legacy of Prince Buthelezi and to win back the province of KwaZulu-Natal back to the IFP.
Mr. Buthelezi, thank you so much for your time. Of course, that was a family representative, of course, and the mayor of Zululand, just giving some insights as to actually what happens from now on. There will be a church service later on here, Francis, in memory of the late Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. With that said, it's back to you in studio.
All right, thank you very much, Natasha. And let's go back to Professor Becky Ngomezulu from the Nelson Mandela University and also cultural expert Professor Musa Olu. Let me start with you, Professor Ngomezulu. We were discussing earlier the rift between the IFP and the ANC, and you were talking about the historical ties. I mean, remember Mangosuthu Buthelezi said that OR Tambo approved of the IFP being formed. So how does the president handle that history, and then what happened after when he speaks tomorrow?
You are absolutely right, Francis. Indeed, the formation of Inkatha Inkululeko Yesizwe in 1975 happened after the blessings of the ANC in exile, including the leader of the party, that is the late Oliver Tambo. And the reason why it was called Inkatha Inkululeko Yesizwe is because they were trying to avoid a situation whereby the apartheid government was going to raise its eyebrows. They then claimed to be reviving what had been started by King Dinizulu called Inkatha KwaZulu, so that at least it will be seen as a cultural movement and not necessarily as a political organization. Which is why then, as I was saying to some of your colleagues, that some members of the ANC, both at national and provincial legislatures, were once part of the of Inkatha because they were representing. The Inkatha was representing the ANC, and that is why Inkatha used the colors of the ANC until on the eve of the 1994 general election. So the question then becomes, with Buthelezi gone, and with his last wish that there should be reconciliation between the ANC and the IFP, will this indeed happen? I'm doubtful, even though the leader of the party now, the Honorable Velenko Senhlabisa, and the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile, made a commitment that they will do that. My doubts are occasioned by the fact that in KwaZulu-Natal, the IFP is working with the DA, and then at national level, the IFP is part of this multi-party pact, multi-party charter for South Africa, which is led by the DA, which was once called the Moonshot Pact. So the question then is, how do you do this reconciliation when at the same time you are forging relations with the DA? Of course, the response from the IFP will be the wish that Buthelezi had was not necessarily a coalition between the ANC and the IFP, but it was just a matter of wanting to see reconciliation between the two. How they are going to work that out is something that we'll be watching to see how it's going to pan out. But the promises have been made. Making a promise is one thing, fulfilling it is something different altogether. We'll watch and see.
Professor Olu, before we talk about the rituals, are you willing to comment on what you believe the prospects are for his dying wish to be realized, peace between the ANC and IFP?
Well, there was a time, thanks a lot, Prof. Ngomezulu, for outlining and also pointing out that it may be quite impossible. Can I confess that sometime last year, I think it was June, because I had many meetings with Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. So I had this one meeting where he spoke exactly about this wish for the reconciliation to happen to me. I shared this kind of wish with certain people, and it did not end very well. I can't see it happening because I think the IFP, as IFP, has created its own identity now. It's a full identity. The ANC in KwaZulu-Natal is slightly different, by the way, from the ANC nationally. It's easier, for example, it was easier for me, for example, to talk to some informally, some senior ANC leaders nationally than it could have been talking to local leadership. So I don't think that it will happen. However, what needs to happen now is a situation where they have to learn to respect each other's spaces and do lesser and lesser of phenomena like Ntoloism, where you wake up in the morning and shout, and then at one another. And then, of course, if they learn to respect one another in terms of their spaces, there shall be peace. I think the president did very well by taking this funeral to level 1 so that it does not become a provincial funeral. Because if it had been a provincial funeral, there would have been a disaster there in terms of relations between the two parties. So, yeah, it's problematic is in terms of how they view each other, very, very adversarial in approach.
Professor, I really appreciate this insight because you've spoken to people on the ground and you're giving us some insight into relations between the ANC and IFP in KwaZulu-Natal. Our international editor was saying we can't have violence in the province next year. It can't be a no-go area for politicians as we head to an election. Is that a possibility that it'll all flare up quite dramatically next year?
No, I don't think it will go that route. The problem now with political violence is that in KZN it's very silent, and it is within each political party, people vying for positions. It's big now to be a mayor or even to be a councillor. You become very influential. So it is the biggest problem, as Minister Beitel was saying at some stage, is within political parties where they start chasing each other around. What happens in the process is that some people will find it easier to relate to the other political party than within their own political parties. But I can't see the KwaZulu-Natal people going out to the level of the pre-1994 levels of violence. It won't happen. People are now a little bit more matured in terms of understanding politics and their needs. They will look for people who can deliver the services and who can respect them. So whatever, if the IFP and the ANC, I can't see them fighting openly, violently anymore. But what's going to happen is the contestation of positions within each political party, and you'll find a lot of that happening in the months leading to the elections because of what I mean, I don't know, I can't remember what Professor Mangosuthu maybe knows, but to be an MP or an MPL for 5 years, you are quite secure financially speaking. So that's where the problem is now.
Yeah, and I mean, the research suggests that a lot of the political killing is about access to position, and then you also have access to resources, securing bidders that you like. Professor Mngomezulu, we were talking earlier about the maturity of the IFP that is required now. You said it'll be a test of the political maturity of the IFP, how it handles generally the election and going forward after the prince's death. And I guess both sides have to show themselves to be mature to prevent any violence that would be cross-party.
Yeah, thank you very much, Francis.
Sorry, Professor Mngomezulu.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much, Francis. First of all, let me echo the sentiments of my colleague, Professor Xolo, on two issues. One, intra-party violence is what is a problem now, not inter-party violence, which we saw happening previously. That is where the problem is, because we have career politicians, people who would ordinarily not have jobs, and then they are seeing politics as the only mechanism available for them to amass wealth. That is where the problem starts. You no longer have a violence between the ANC and the IFP like we saw in the 1990s. It's a different ball game altogether. And then, of course, I also agree with him that we don't foresee a situation where there will be outright political violence in KwaZulu-Natal in the same magnitude that we saw in the 1990s for the reasons he has just stated. But on the issue of political maturity that we talked about, I'll repeat that indeed the onus is on the current leadership on both sides of the equation. There is the ANC and the IFP. But the reason why we're emphasizing the IFP is because we're saying that they would like to basically carry on with Prince Buthelezi's legacy. And the best way they can do that is to make sure that they don't do a repeat of what happened in the NFP. You recall that the NFP was formed by the late Mamuzanele Msebi, and she did a fantastic job securing 6 seats in KwaZulu-Natal legislature and then also 6 seats at the national level when they contested that election. And the party was on the upward trajectory until such time that she took ill, and then that's where things went wrong. When she passed on, that was basically the last thing that happened. Instead of the NFP following the constitution of the party, they started fighting for positions, which comes back to the point we are making that intra-party squabbles are more problematic than inter-party squabbles. Look at where the NFP is now. It has been suspended by the IEC simply because it could not survive after the passing of Mamgama Kwazamsebi. Is the IFP ready to avoid that situation? That is $1 million question. That is why then I keep on saying the maturity of the party is what is going to decide whether the IFP grows or it dies.
All right, thank you both, Professor Becky Mngomezulu, Professor Musa Xulu as well. Thank you for your time. Let's wrap it up there and just a recap. The body of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi has arrived at the Buthelezi homestead.